Hey, what's going on, guys? I am the Mystical Green Beanie, which you probably already know by clicking on this video. So just a quick FYI, before I get into the review, part 2 of my Ultimates retrospective is almost done. I'll be finishing up the editing this week. It's not a long video, surprisingly, but I still had a lot to say, and I want it to be concise, while also not going on too many tangents. But yeah, I just wanted to keep you guys updated because that's a video that you asked for, and I wanted you to know that I did not forget about it. Now, regarding the Snyder Cut. So, this isn't going to be an in-depth review. This is more along the lines of me incoherently rambling about this movie that I've seen twice in the past week, and just giving you my unfiltered thoughts. And the long and the short of it is, I liked it. I really enjoyed it. Is it the best comic book movie ever made? No. Objectively speaking, not at all. Not in the slightest. Not even in the ballpark. But subjectively, is it one of my favorite?
You're goddamn right.
So, I remember watching the theatrical version of Justice League, and I was like, bro, I was in denial. I was like, well, I don't hate it. It's not that bad. Dude, it took me a few months to really process the fact that we finally got a live-action Justice League movie, and Superman's lip was CGI, Batman was a Joss Whedon character, The Flash was discount Spider-Man with ADD, revolving around a Power Rangers plot with a stupid Power Rangers villain, which, by the way, completely shits on the New Gods mythology and lore. So, yeah, that movie was, in all honesty, not the worst comic book movie that I've ever seen. That honor still goes to Fant Forstick, I think, but I will hyperbolically say that it's the worst comic book movie that I've ever seen in theaters, based off the simple fact that it's the Justice League, and this had so much potential to be great. And like I said, is the Snyder Cut the greatest comic book movie of all time? No. I'll get into my reasons for why in a bit, but just out the gate, I love this movie. Aside from a few things here and there, it's everything that I've ever wanted from a Justice League movie. I've heard a lot of people compare it to Lord of the Rings, specifically Return of the King, which is a very appropriate comparison. Or at the very least, I think it's an appropriate comparison. It sounds like an appropriate comparison. I'll keep it a buck. I've never actually watched Lord of the Rings. I'm just not a sword and sorcery kind of guy, which is weird considering how much I love magic and mythology and Hellblazer and Doctor Strange and Devil May Cry and stuff like that. But I could just never get into Lord of the Rings. But I digress. The point is, this is a very mythic film, and it's very earnest in its presentation. It never feels the need to undercut itself or be too self-referential or self-aware. It was very old school in that kind of way. And it reminded me of classic biblical epics like the Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur and Jason and the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans and even 47 Ronin, which I know is a very recent movie, but that also had a very traditional presentation to it. And this movie perfectly established the difference between Marvel and DC. Not that there's a big difference, and I'll make a video about that one day. But yeah, this movie highlights the difference between Marvel and DC in the sense that DC is a universe built on mythology and grandeur, while Marvel's is built on subverting those mythological tropes in being self-aware and undercutting the tropes of superhero fiction, which, for the most part, the MCU does pretty well. However, I think given the reception of movies like Shazam and Aquaman, I think DC's going to go more in a Marvel direction of making subversive superhero movies. Despite the fact that I think in a modern age, being earnest and not undercutting every serious moment with a joke has become subversive. But back to this movie, and really back to this trilogy, I've always wanted a comic book movie series that was mythological and biblical in nature, but also something that explored how superheroes as an institution affected the social political landscape, and how these gods are really just people, but have the power to become monsters just by nature of the power that they have, and how that power can change the world, whether it be for the betterment or the damnation of mankind. So basically what I've always wanted to see was Mark Millar and Brian Hitch's The Ultimates, and Grant Morrison, J.G. Jones, and Doug Monk's Final Crisis, but on the big screen. In fact, I'll go as far to say that Zack Snyder's Justice League is the Final Crisis of comic book movies. And you can take that however you will. I know for me personally, I have the same relationship with this movie that I have with Final Crisis. And look, I love Final Crisis. Like, I love Final Crisis. It is possibly my favorite superhero comic book. It's literally a melodramatic biblical epic. But it's a little long. Some would say too long. And parts of it just don't even make any fucking sense. But on the whole, I appreciate what Final Crisis is saying about superheroes using the narrative trappings of theology and myth to tell that story, and I can echo those same exact sentiments with the Snyder Cut. This movie is big. Like, Clash of the Titans big. And in the same way that Man of Steel is very dry and mythic, this movie is very dry and mythic. And much like Final Crisis, it ain't the most commercial product in the world. And in a very self-centered way, I feel like these movies were made just for me. But also, on that note, what I think this trilogy's biggest advantage is also winds up being its biggest weakness. Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Zack Snyder's Justice League all feel like comic books directly translated to the silver screen. The upside of that is, much like with comics, we're seeing a creator just open their anal glands and express how they feel and how they see the world with these iconic characters. The problem with that is that comics are very niche. They're allowed to be avant-garde. They're allowed to tell stories where Superman has 3 dimensions and isn't a cardboard cutout Boy Scout archetype. Or tell stories where Batman, a character whose pop culture status sees him as the good guy who has everything under control all the time. Comics can, and sometimes will, depict Batman as a legitimate fucking psychopath who, if we're gonna be honest, can be more of an antagonist than a protagonist. But again, comics are a niche medium where you can actually be creative. Not to imply that the MCU is devoid of creativity, but I think a big reason why the MCU is as popular as it is quite frankly because of its commercial appeal. Those films, for the most part, are very safe and very obvious. They're PG-13 Power Rangers movies that take the essence of classic comic book stories and water them down to be more palatable for a mass audience, and filter them through the traditional Hollywood blockbuster formula. And that's not a bad thing, but it's just not for me. Oh, and something else that I want to talk about before I get into my complaints and negative criticisms is the simple fact that everybody in this movie has an important role to play and doesn't feel superfluous. Wonder Woman is equally as important as Aquaman, who's equally as important as Batman, who's equally as important as Cyborg, who's equally as important as The Flash, who's equally as important as Superman. It's not like the Joss Whedon version where everyone's pretty useless until Superman shows up. Also, I genuinely like how the League, in a weird way, with as traditionally as this narrative is presented, subverts the modern team-up trope of these people have massive egos and they don't play nice with others. That was something in the Whedon cut that felt lifted from the Avengers. But here, everybody gets along just fine, and they behave like adults who talk to each other. I don't know, that was just something that I noticed and I really appreciated. Okay, so now getting into my criticisms, which, There aren't many, but the ones I do have are pretty substantial. And the one major complaint that I have with this movie is the runtime. 4 fucking hours. Which, by the way, wasn't that bad, especially when watching it on a streaming service. I mean, I binged watched every season of Daredevil the second those seasons dropped, and I had no problem, so this was kind of a breeze for me. But just imagining if this wasn't on a streaming service. This is a lot of movie. Granted, I heard that the original plan was to split this into 2 movies and then release them 6 months apart, Deathly Hallows style, but this movie doesn't feel like it flows well in doing that. Plus, there's just a lot of shit that you can cut. And there's shit that you should cut. The last 10 minutes of the movie with the Nightmare Future and Martian Manhunter, cut. In fact, you can cut Martian Manhunter out of this movie entirely and it would work just fine. If anything, he should be cut from the scene between Martha and Lois, because making Martha Martian Manhunter in that scene ruins that scene. It would have been way better if it was just Martha and Lois talking about their shared grief over Clark's death. The scene with Aquaman saving that guy from the shipwreck. It's cool, it's beautifully shot, and I like seeing superheroes save people in a superhero movie, but you can cut it. Just like you can cut the scene where Bruce is talking to Diana about his deja vu with the Flash, and Cyborg hiding from parademons in his apartment, and that Norwegian chick who's sniffing Aquaman's shirt and singing to him like he's Jesus. Like, there's just... You can easily cut this movie down to 3 hours. Maybe 3 hours and 15 minutes. But there's just a lot here that you don't need. And this very easily could have been released in theaters as a 3-hour movie. Then there's little stuff like, why is Steppenwolf's armada invading Earth now, as opposed to literally any time before? I know that they say in the movie that the Mother Boxes were afraid of Superman, but, like, Superman didn't show up until at least 2013, and Wonder Woman killed Ares, the last of the old gods, at the end of World War I. So, the fuck were they waiting for 100 years? And this isn't just a problem with this movie. It's a problem with pretty much all superhero fiction, especially on film. But, like, it took Thanos 20 movies to assemble the Infinity Stones. Why? But yeah, that happens a lot, and it's pretty irritating. And one last little shitcake of critique. Zack Snyder never uses establishing shots. I know what the Gotham City skyline looks like through a thick fog, but I don't know what Gotham looks like in this universe. Just like outside of Heroes Park, I can't tell you what Metropolis looks like. I don't know what the Daily Planet building looks like. I don't know what Clark and Lois's apartment looks like. Zack Snyder glosses over little details sometimes, which makes me sympathetic to when people don't pick up on what he's putting down sometimes, and that's just a thing that he does that's really kind of annoying. Other than that, I really like this movie, but then again, I feel like I have to say this all the time. I like Zack Snyder, and I like his movies. Those are just my artistic sensibilities, and that's just what I'm into. But what about you? What did you like about this movie? What didn't you like about this movie? Who is your favorite character? Mine was... Well, while watching it, my favorite character was the Flash. Although I'm not really sure how much of that was due to the fact that I was high on the fact that the Flash was doing Flash things without having a team of super scientists in his ear instructing him on how to do basic shit like run in a circle. But the more I think about it, I think my favorite character in the movie might be Cyborg. Ray Fisher's Cyborg was really cool in this. But anyways, let me know down below in the comment section. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button, share, support the channel, and if you want to see more content like this, all you have to do is subscribe. And before I leave you guys, first of all, this video was late. I was supposed to upload this a few days ago, but clearly that didn't happen. Family stuff, I'm sorry, but it was just out of my hands. But second, over on the Previews World YouTube channel, you can see that I've already done an in-depth discussion with an amazing panel of talented and insightful individuals, so do yourself a favor and check that video out. I've left a link in the description below. Anyways, I'm the Mystical Green Beanie. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, until next time, adios nachos, adios.